Դոկտոր Alexey Iskakov, Ռուսաստանի գիտությունների ակադեմիա, Մոսկվայի ֆիզիկայի եւ տեխնիկայի ինստիտուտ, հանդիպումներ երևելի մարդկանց հետ, գիրքը որպես Գյուրջիևի ուսմունքներում հոգևոր աշխատանքի այլաբանություն։ Dr. Alexey Iskakov, Moscow Institute of Physics and Technologies, Russia Academy of Science, meetings with remarkable minds and allegory of spiritual work in the teachings of Gurdjieff.
Thank you for introducing me. It's a great pleasure to be here and to have an opportunity to present our work, the work of our research group. I'll be talking today about the book Meetings with Remarkable Men as an allegory of spiritual work in the teachings of G.I. Gurdjieff. So, first of all, I will start with the motivation. In the books of Uspensky, such lectures in search of the miraculous and the fourth way, the teachings of Gurdjieff were presented as a universal spiritual system now known as the fourth way. And actually, his brilliant presentation attracted a lot of followers to this teaching. And however, many of them faced the fact that Uspensky presentation of the system is incomplete. On the other hand, many people believe that the full description of the fourth way system is encrypted in the books of Gurdjieff himself. However, they faced the challenge to decipher these books. And today, 100 years after Gurdjieff began writing his books, there are several valuable comments on the first series of his books have appeared, such as by Alfred Orridge, Charles Knott, John Bennett, and some others. However, in contrast, the second series, Meetings with Remarkable Men, is still regarded mainly as autobiographical in nature. It was used in biographical work of James Moore, and it was adopted into a film very well known by Peter Brook. But we can say that symbolic interpretation of this of the second series remains hidden up to now, and this is the motivation of my talk today. So now I will introduce the work of our research group. And for a long time, the original manuscripts written by Gurdjieff in Russian and Armenian were not available. You may not know, but the original text of Balzibab's tales to his grandson in Russian was first published only in 2000 in Toronto. And consequently, in 2010, a research group gathered in Moscow with the goal to dig up the system from his original text. And almost immediately after we finished reading the first series, the second series in original Russian was published. It was in 2015, and Gurdjieff readings received a natural continuation. As one participant of this group today, I will outline the symbolic interpretation of Meetings with Remarkable Men that were employed as the foundation of our Gurdjieff readings in 2016-2019. So in the introduction, the author indicates that separate tales in the book are arranged in such an order that, among other things, there may stand out distinctly the outline of his, as it were, autobiography. Here in italics, I use direct citation from the book. And in Russian text, autobiography is taken in quotation marks. So from this, we assumed that the book will describe the path of the emergence and development of the real I. And Gurdjieff actually narrates on behalf of the real I. And at the same time, remarkable people symbolize parts of the inner world of a man who he encounters on the path of his spiritual development and transformation. So now I will describe a little bit the basic of this interpretation. As you well know, as you know, Gurdjieff's in the Gurdjieff's teaching, inner development of a man involves working with the four lower functions: thinking, feeling, moving, and instinctive function. So it would be reasonable to meet inside our world the representatives of these functions. Uh, and indeed, in the chapter dedicated to Captain Pagasian, he is given the following brief and concise description. Pagasian was always occupied. He was always working on something. He never sat, as is said, with folded arms. And one never saw him laying down uh, like the comrades reading diverting books. Maybe I will read here. Which give nothing real. In the head, if he had no definite work to do, he would either swing his arms in rhythm, mark time with his feet, or make all kinds manipulations with his fingers. So we can see that this characteristic is primarily related to the physical body and is associated with Gurdjieff practices related to finger movements, counting footsteps, and just manipulations, and rhythm. So it corresponds very well to the description and practices for the moving center. And then we take the next character. This is the following description of Abram Yelov. Besides being a phenomenon in the knowledge of books and authors, Yelov later on became a phenomenon in the knowledge of languages, just as Pagasian had a peculiar notion about physical work, so Yelov had a very original view about mental work. He once said, "It's all the same. The thoughts work day and night. Instead of allowing them to think about caps of invisibility or the riches of Aladdin, rather let them be occupied with something useful. I therefore decided to study languages, not only to prevent my thoughts from idling, but also not to allow them to hinder my other functions with the idiotic dreams and childish fantasies." And you could see clearly that this is a good description of the proper functioning of the thinking center in the Gurdjieff's tradition. So, and if you take the next character, the next chapter of this story, it tells us a story about the good prince Yuri Lubavetsky, whose smile was an indicator of kindness, love, and tolerance. And you know, in Russian, his names literally means the one who knows love. So it's very easy we can associate him with the emotional center. And the next remarkable man is Ekimbey, and for him only the instinctive center can be remains. And indeed, Gurdjieff described him as a magician, a hypnotist, a physician, and a foreteller. So, and it is to him that Persian dervish describes the needs and possibilities of the physical body. So we can conclude that Gurdjieff describes working with the four lower functions or centers. So the next clue is given in the introduction. Gurdjieff promises to elucidate 7 sayings in these books. And for us, that was an indication that the chapters in the book should be arranged into the notes of the octave and put on the enneagram symbol. So you could see that there are 4 notes, Fa, Sol, La, and Si, which corresponds the 4 lower centers. And the first 3 chapters, corresponding to the notes Do, Re, Mi, they describe 3 remarkable men who directly teach Mr. Gurdjieff, his father, his tutor, tutor Borsch, and Bogachevsky. And I will try to show that they can represent actually symbolically 3 levels of the preliminary training. So the first chapter is dedicated to his father. His father, poet and narrator of poems, songs, legends, and folk tales. He lays the foundation for higher aspirations in Gurdjieff. And there is an association with the concept of the magnetic center in Gurdjieff's teaching, which establishes exactly in man a call to the higher nature. Having no name in this chapter, which is very unusual, his father is known under the nickname Adash. In Turkish and Persian, this word Adash has approximately the same meaning, which is as under the name of another, which means that in this book, songs, legends, and folk tales actually tell us under the name of another about something that has no name. And the main task of the magnetic center in Gurdjieff teaching is to create the right conditions, habits, and attitudes for the inner work. And accordingly to this, the father sees the aim of human life as creating an inner freedom towards life and preparing for himself a happy old age. And it's exactly the right foundation, because without relative inner freedom, no inner work is possible. And it's only the spiritual work which can provide happy old age. So, and then we can consider the 4 commandments of the father of Gurdjieff, that they can be quite easily interpreted. The first one is you should love your higher nature. The second, remain pure in relation to the goals and intentions in your life. The third one, don't identify with opinions of others. And the fourth one, don't to be identified with the results of your activities. And this is exactly the habits which provide inner freedom and independence from outside influences. So the next teacher is Father Archpriest Borsch. And I will start with his name. You know, in Russian manuscript, the name Borsch is written like borscht, which is exactly the same as the name of popular Ukrainian and Russian soup. And this soup is boiled for a long time, and it became very nutritious and caloric in the process. So the expression Father Borsch looks like Father Soup, with some natural associations to be boiled in. And you see that Borsch undertook to teach Gurdjieff differently than how teaching happens in school, and organized this training. We can assume that the school teachers selected by tutor Borsch may correspond to the teaching in 4 lower centers. So what kind of this teaching? What kind of teaching is this? So as an example, we can examine the work organized by Gurdjieff in the Prieuré. And you remember that first there were Spartan living conditions, physical work, and necessity to develop different moving skills in the moving center. And second, the disciples lived together and worked in the team, which implies the need to get along and socialize with different people. And we know that some of them were not very pleasant indeed. And finally, art performances, lectures, and discussions of high topic were held, and seekers are intensely simmered in this kind of soup, in this borscht, and obtain various experiences of being in all lower centers. This is a special kind of preparation. To not reach at that end, the training of being must necessarily be connected with the right direction of spiritual work. And to avoid imbalance, the father and the tutor should meet regularly in the workshop. And they must practice castoncilia in English edition, and in Russian manuscript it's in quotation mark cast efforts, just directly cast efforts. So in which the father, which means the work side, would okay, without haste, would calmly and seriously answer unexpected and apparently quiet of place questions from Borsch, that is, from the side of being. And now we can find something very interesting. Creating the right conditions and attitudes for the spiritual work is like preparing a kitchen for work. And this is the process of creating proper habits and attitudes in the mechanical parts of the centers, if we consider in the teaching of Gurdjieff. And this is what is described in the first chapter. The development of being in centers is like cooking borscht, or kind of soup, or the third force. And this is the process of forming the emotional or feeling parts of the centers in the Gurdjieff teaching. And this is what is described in the second chapter. And castoncilia, or cast efforts, are the efforts to cast the mechanical and emotional parts of the centers together. And in the first and second chapters, Gurdjieff remains passive. He is being nurtured and trained. And in contrast, in the third chapter, he himself gets to Alexandropol to earn money. He also begins to seek his own understanding and tries to answer questions on his own. And finally, he tries to separate artificial morality from the conscience. That is, he begins to listen the voice of his own heart. We can observe that in all three centers, a new quality appears, associated with the development of the thinking or intellectual parts. So these are the parts of the center that are capable of producing their own result. And instead of living on someone else's money, following the rules of external morality, and using other people's opinions, one learns to earn with one's own hands, think with one's own head, and feel with one's own heart. Um, and this allows one to establish one's own foundation of life, one that is based on external attitudes. And if we can go through the next teacher, we can get many confirmation and practices how to do that. So, uh, in order to finish the structure of this interpretation of the book, we need to answer one question: what place in the octave should the remaining chapters about Pyotr Karpenko and Professor Skridlov take? And there are actually following quotes from the book that give us a fairly clear hint. The first citation: to this unexpected and high sounding request of Ekim Bey, this venerable man, the Persian dervish, replied with precision and the great detail. What he then explained, I have decided to expound later in the corresponding chapter of the third series of my writings called The Physical Body of Man. Second citation: his reply to Karpenko's question developed into a kind of lengthy sermon of profound interest and significance. The words then spoken by this old Yezunovuran I will also record, but only in the third series of my writings, in a chapter entitled The Astral Body of Man. And the third citation, in answer to this exclamation of Skridlov, Father Giovanni expressed those remarkable thoughts which I shall place as relating to the question of the soul in the chapter entitled The Divine Body of Man. So, the instinctive center is told about the physical body, which is logical, and who is told about astral and mental body. So whoever Karpenko and Skridlov are, they represent astral and mental bodies, mental octaves in a man. And this means that they should be the octaves to enter the intervals mi, fa, and sol, la of the physical octave as additional octave according to the three-story factory model in Gurdjieff teaching. And this can be shown on the Enneagram symbol. Between notes mi and fa enters the point 6 enters astral octave, Pyotr Karpenko, and between notes sol and la enters Professor Skridlov, which represents mental octave. So,
Dr. Iskakov, but we don't have any more time.
Some final results. So, interpreting the chapters of in Meetings with Remarkable Man as elements of man's inner world allows us to see in the autobiographical stories a detailed description and guide to spiritual work in the tradition of the Fourth Way. And using an allegorical form, Gurdjieff describes the individual stages of work, their correct sequence, as well as the interaction of different lines in such work, which is important in particular in chapters on Karpenko, Skridlov. Gurdjieff explains bridging intervals in the spiritual work, which was not explained in Uspensky's book. And further results and conclusions obtained by our group was published as the commentary on Meetings with Remarkable Men in a limited edition last year. So actually, if anyone is interested in an English version, we are ready to cooperate. And technical translation of 10% of the book in English will be available to the participants upon request. So this is the title of our book. And still some further conclusions. Gurdjieff's works are of exceptional importance for the cultural heritage of Armenia and Russia, as they are an unprecedented unprecedented allegorical text with many layers of inner meaning, similar to the sacred texts of the religious traditions. And as far as I know, no anything like that exists in Russian literature. And I assume that that may be the same for Armenia. The progress in the interpretation was achieved thanks to the publication of the original text of the first and second series of Gurdjieff works in Russian. And we sincerely thanks those people who did it. And maybe perhaps someone here, let me know. And the time becomes a critical factor because in 100 years, the language has changed, Armenian and Russian, and the people have changed dramatically. Very soon, we will have very little people who can understand this cultural context and language of Gurdjieff. And therefore, I think that publication of the original unpublished texts in Armenian and of the third series of the works in Russian is of exceptional importance uh, because both for understanding Gurdjieff teaching and for preserving his legacy. Later on, no one will be able to understand and decipher these meanings for us. And that may bring to the situation when Gurdjieff books will be forgotten. At least some of this meanings. So that is our message. Thank you very much. And I can answer your question if any.
Thank you for interesting article and if you have question, please.
Thank you. I had noticed the connection between Father Borsch and beetroot, and it's just clicked with me that a beetroot was used to knock out by an officer a tradesman's eye.
Just could you just repeat a little bit?
Of course.
Uh-huh.
A beetroot, the source of borscht soup, was used by an officer to knock out the eye of a tradesman who wanted to be paid. He said, I see, our masters eat goose. The officer got cross and knocked out his eye with a beetroot. So for me, I have a lawful inexactitude to reflect upon, and I thank you for giving it to me.
Okay, thank you. That was mostly comment, right?
I feel so.
Yes, thank you.
I do that.
And thank you all and thank you very much.
But maybe if there are more questions,
Yeah.
let's see.
Sorry, we don't have any more time, please. Ես ուզում եմ շնորհակալություն հայտնել մեր բոլոր բանախոսներին եւ մնում է ինձ այս պայն այն բոլորին հրավիրել Իսկ մնում է այս պայն միայն բոլորին հրավիրել Երևանի կինոյի տուն դիտելու Մայքլ Գյուրջյանի ամերիկացի ֆիլմը. And thank you very much. Thank you to our speakers and thank you all for your engagement. And finally, we invite to everyone to watch the film Amerikazi at the Yerevan Cinema House. So thank you very much and have a nice evening and thank you again.
Before you all head out, I just wanted to say that on behalf of all of us who were present at today's proceedings, I'd like to thank all of our speakers for their stimulating presentations and the important questions they raise on the conceptualization and interpretations of Gurdjieff's teaching. As was just announced, the conference activities continue this evening at the Cinematographer Center downtown at 7:30 with a screening of Michael Gurdjieff's film Amerikazi of 2022. This film won a series of awards at international film festivals and was Armenia's entry to the 2024 Oscars in the category of Best Foreign Feature Film, where it made the shortlist, a unique achievement for Armenian film industry. This will be followed by a Q&A with the director, which inaugurates the theme of Gurdjieff's influences on the arts through Gurdjieff's reminiscences on the impact of his several years in the Gurdjieff work in San Francisco has had on his multiple activities in the industry as author, actor, and director. And one further point I'd like just to make very quickly is that there will be a gathering next Thursday for those who are in town and are free. That's Thursday, the 25th of, and this is at 8 p.m. at the Café Minor, which is at 132 Zakian Street. So for those of you who are free then and are interested in a gathering relating to the Gurdjieff teaching, please feel free to attend.